Guys, the odds of becoming an Olympic champion, it's 1 in 22 million. We're here inside the Vegas Huddle at FOX5 Studios, inside the den with the great Connor Fields, an Olympic gold medal champion. Connor, a Vegas local, a guy who grew up here. It's a pleasure to have you inside the den, inside the Vegas Huddle with us. Thanks for being here. How are you?
Hey, happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and I'm doing well. Doing real well.
When you hear that stat, 1 in 22 million, those are the odds. I mean, for you to actually have won an Olympic gold medal, 2016 in Rio, when you hear that figure and being a little kid dreaming of this, how does it all feel sitting here today?
It's a great question, and to be honest, it's changed over the last 6 years since I won the gold medal. And I think the farther away you get from it, almost the more appreciation you have for it.
Yeah.
Especially now that I've officially retired. You're not able, when you're competing, when you're active, you don't stop and pat yourself on the back and think, oh, I did it, I'm great, I won. You know, you're thinking, how am I going to win the next one? How am I going to keep getting better? How am I going to get bigger, faster, stronger? But then when you're done and you no longer have to worry about trying to win the next race, you can look back and think, that was pretty cool.
Now, is that a Connor Fields thing, or is that just an Olympic, an elite level athlete thing? To me, I would think most elite level athletes, professional athletes, when they're in it, they can't be burdened by looking back. It's always looking ahead. Is that just an athlete thing?
I can only speak from my perspective, but all the elite athletes in every sport that I know, they have similarities that way.
Yeah.
Where they have this amazing achievement or they win this crazy event or whatever it is, and instead of celebrating for the next 6 months, 3 days later they're back at practice trying to figure out the one mistake that they made. Right? They won the Super Bowl, but they threw an interception, so we got to fix what I did there for that interception or whatever it is. So I think that in order to reach like the crazy heights of anything, whether it's sport, business, the arts, whatever it is, in order to reach that 1 in 22 million like level, you have to be a little bit crazy. And with that comes the relentless pursuit of perfection and getting better.
And I think we're going to dive deep into this because I want to learn about that pursuit of excellence. And, when we hear your backstory and how you grew up, we're really going to get a lot of insight into how this came to be. But when it comes to BMX, you're like synonymous with the sport. You're the guy here in Las Vegas that everybody talks about. I know I was doing a story recently with a young man named Jackson Howell. He loves you. Everybody just knows Connor Fields, Las Vegas, BMX. It's all a mashup of greatness. And, you're born in Plano. You move here to Vegas as a little kid. You graduate from Green Valley High School. But it's really amazing because at the age of 7, it was very serendipitous of how this all came about. Tell me if this is true. Your mom, Lisa, sees a flyer advertising a local BMX track at a bike shop around town. And from that just random flyer, you end up going to try out this new sport at the age of 7. Is this what happens?
Yeah, so I learned how to ride a bike when I was 6, 7 years old, like most kids do, and I loved it from the time I learned how to ride. I would always just be riding up and down the street in front of my house, and once I got a little better, I was jumping off the curb and trying to pop wheelies. I loved riding my bike.
Yeah.
And my mom took my bike into the shop one day for some repairs and saw the flyer. And I guess her thought was, oh, he loves riding his bike. Maybe he'd like this. So we went out and we watched some local racing. And the track that we went to was out over near the Air Force Base. So, it was back then, that was the other side of town. Back in the 90s, it was a really far away. And so we went out, I watched, and I guess the next week I bugged my mom all week that I wanted to go try it. And the next week I tried it, did my first time riding, my first race, and never looked back.
And by 11, you completely give up all other sports. You start specializing at the age of 11. What was it about riding and bikes that just spoke to you more so than anything else, especially when you're reflecting now? What do you think it was?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I wish I could go back into my 10-year-old mind and think, see what I was thinking, see what I was feeling. I played other sports. I played t-ball, soccer, flag football, played it all when I was a kid. And What it came down to was when I was like 11 years old, I would be at a baseball game and have to leave early to make the BMX races that night.
Wow.
Or I would have to miss an important football game because I was going to a BMX race. And it just didn't really work trying to do both things. And it wasn't fair to my teammates
Right.
to miss on certain things. And my parents kind of said, you have to pick one or the other. And at least for now, what do you want to do? And, I think it's a big mistake that I see all the time with athletes in all sports specializing too young. I don't think any 8, 9, 10-year-old should be locked in on one specific sport unless that's what they want. Because you're going to learn so much about sports, about your body, about working out from different sports it's all applicable to yourself as a whole as you're developing. But for me, I wanted it. I just wanted to ride. So my parents allowed me to focus on that. And at that point in time, BMX wasn't in the Olympics yet.
Right.
This
So
is
I'm 30, you're 29. So to me, I think around that
29 for 2 more weeks. I'm almost there. Almost 30.
the thing that and that's what's so amazing for everything you've accomplished at 29. I'm starting to feel bad about
No.
myself. But like Travis Pastrana was a big name. But BMX stuff, I mean, it feels like it's getting bigger. How do you feel about that? I mean, is it back then when you were growing up? Was it fluid and in the culture? Is it,
When I was growing up, I was kind of growing up in the peak of, I guess, like the tail end of the peak of counterculture, right? So when you think of that, like skateboarding, BMX, things like that, they all kind of originated in the late 60s, early 70s. And that was like the Lords of Dogtown era. And that was kind of like the birth of BMX. And that was when people would just, for the first time ever, started trying to take a handoff when they were in the air. Or maybe they would do a 1-footer and things like that. And then into the 80s and then the 90s is kind of when the X Games came about. And that was when the X Games started. And that was when technology continued to advance and the bikes and the equipment was getting better and stronger. And you were able to do more because the bikes were better. When you look back at the bikes that they were riding in the 60s and 70s, it's incredible to me that those riders were able to do what they did with the bikes they were given.
Wow.
Because if you look at these bikes, you're like, how on earth could you jump and land and the bike doesn't just disintegrate? Compared to now, my bike's completely carbon fiber. Right? It's just changed a lot. But yeah, I guess when I was growing up, BMX was definitely not the normal thing to do. Like, my friends all played football and basketball and hockey or, whatever the more mainstream sport was. But I just was drawn to BMX for some reason.
And do you think, anything about your personality specifically that is more geared towards independent sports rather than team-centric sports?
I'll give you one story.
Yeah.
And this is my dad's favorite story to tell.
Yeah.
And this kind of explains a little bit about why BMX was for me. I was 10 years old. I was playing rec league basketball. And at that point in time, I think it was co-ed. Everybody plays the same amount of time. They keep score, but it's not all about the winning. Right at the end of the year, everybody gets a pizza party and a trophy, which is awesome. I have no problem with that.
You'd like the participant trophy culture a little bit.
To a certain age.
Okay.
Once you hit a certain age, no.
Okay.
But in this instance, we were at a basketball game, and the coach was trying to take me out. And we were like down by a few points, and the person that he was replacing me with, I felt I was better than. And so I told the coach, no. And the coach was like, oh, Connor, you've played your 10 minutes. Your time's up. It's time for Billy or whoever to jump in. I was like, no. Coach was like, oh, you got to come off. And I'm like, no. And I refused to get off the court. And I threw a whole tantrum because I started yelling, I'm better than him. Because I wanted to win.
Yeah.
And my dad had to pick me up and carry me off the court while I was throwing a tantrum.
Right.
And at that moment, he's like, you know what? Maybe an individual sport is for you. And looking back now at 30, 29, I round up, there's a lot of things about being in an individual sport that are great, right? If I win or if I lose, it's on me. I don't ever have to have that experience of playing an awesome game and doing my job perfectly, but losing.
Right.
Or I never have to have the experience of being on the bench during the final 30 seconds of the game and I cannot control the outcome of this game. it's all on me. If I win, I did it. Of course, there's people around me that helped, but I was the one on the bike doing it. With that said, I will never know what it feels like to celebrate in a locker room with your team after.
Right.
I'll never know what it feels like to pass a teammate the winning shot. And I think there's pros and cons to each, because those would be some amazing experiences to go through as well. But then there's also negatives to it.
To me, when I hear that story from you, the big thing that resonates with me is kind of what you were alluding to earlier, and it's about the mentality of being an Olympic gold medal champion. You know, I love sports. Watching, for instance, The Last Dance with Michael Jordan,
Love it.
seeing the behind the scenes of his mentality, Kobe, you know, what it takes to be that great, to be somebody who's standing up at a podium in Rio getting a gold medal. This is going to be a tough question. Here inside the den for the Vegas Huddle, for Dry Heat, all these shows, we're trying to have really in-depth, deep conversations that can really help people get into the mentality and mind of successful performers, achievers. To be that young and to be that driven and with that mindset, and, you know, it's a lot of difficult, it's a difficult weight to bear, because it's like being a kid who's not, I don't want to say difficult, but, you know, it's challenging. You're challenging other kids. You're being outspoken. You're putting your, you know, ability on the line and comparing it to another kid. And there's an ickiness about that great achievers, I think, need to bear in order to get to a certain place. Is that something that can be taught, or is that something that's just innate and you're born with it and that's who you are?
So there's a few things that go through my head when you're saying that, and there's a few different kind of ways I want to approach this. So going back to what you're talking about in The Last Dance,
Right.
the Kobe Bryant. So when I watch that, or when I hear people like that talk, and I'm not comparing myself to Michael or Kobe, but I feel like I can relate to them. I understand them because I have a similar mindset.
Right.
From the time I can remember, I wanted to win. And it didn't matter if it was, you know, basketball. It didn't matter if it was the science fair at school. Like, if I'm doing something, I just want to win.
Right.
And, you know, I've over time been able to funnel that into, I just wanted to win at BMX. Now, like, I'm so non-competitive when we play Monopoly. Like, my fiance, she's going to flip the table if she loses. Like, she's
You
the
don't care
competitive one.
anymore.
Not on that, but in a lot of other ways, like on something that I decide that I want to try to win at. If I want to be a public speaker, I want to be the best public speaker. If I decide that I want to be a coach, I want to coach champions.
Right.
Right. So if it's something that I want to win, I'm going to go and give it everything I have to win. I've always been like that.
Yeah.
So going back to that, I think it's something I was born with, but I don't necessarily think it's something that, I think it's something that a lot of people may be born with it, but maybe it wasn't nurtured.
Right.
Right. So I think it is a little bit of both nature and nurture, because I was given the opportunity to be competitive, which brought that out in me. If I had never gotten the opportunity to be
Right.
competitive, maybe it would have never been brought out. And with that said, I think had I stuck in team sports longer, I would have been okay, because if you get through the rec league when you're just playing for fun and you get to high school, well, then more people will be competitive. And then if you make it to the next level and you go to collegiate athletics,
Right.
everybody's got at least a little bit of that in them. And then if you go all the way to the professional leagues, every single person that you're with has that in them.
When you're at Olympic Village and you're surrounded by elite level performers that are like you, I mean, everybody has that mentality, right?
They do. There are levels to it, though. So that's why there is a Michael Jordan, and then there's the, I don't want to say average NBA player, because nobody in the NBA is average.
But nobody compares to MJ either, right?
Or Kobe or LeBron. And like, yes, some of it is probably physical and talent, and they just have this ability.
But that's why people, even though how great LeBron is, a lot of people give him crap because they feel like he doesn't have that same competitive edge to the same level of an MJ and a Kobe, and this is LeBron.
And I don't know them. I'm not a huge basketball guy, but if he doesn't, that's he's allowed, he's entitled to that. He doesn't have to be. You
So
don't.
when you're at Olympic Village, are you the type of guy like you're in the lunch line and you're like not gonna let another person like cut in front of you, and you're like, I mean, you're competitive with
No,
to the
no, no,
nth
no, no,
degree?
no, 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 no. I'm channeled. I'm channeled my competitiveness. I'm not competitive 99% of the time.
Can you even be friends with another person who's doing BMX stuff at the Olympics or no?
I actually struggled with that throughout my whole career, being friends with other competitors that I raced against. I had my training partners that I raced against.
Yeah.
But that was a different relationship because we were on the same team. We were competing against each other, but we still helped each other. But I would be respectful, but I had no interest in being friends with the guys I competed against.
Right.
And one of my old team managers when I was younger, he said a quote that stuck with me forever. I was like 15 when he told me this. He said, "Your real friends call you on Monday and ask you how your weekend went. Whether they're racers or whether they're not, your real friends are going to call you on Monday because the races are on Saturday." And I didn't get it at the time. As I got older, I realized it. A lot of the relationship between competitors is a little bit fake because I'm about to try to take your money. I'm about to try to take your job. I'm about to try to block you from taking my spot. I'm about to try to make sure that you have a horrible day. And I'm not going to, before doing that, I don't want to be like, "Hey, bud, how's the fam?"
But some people do that because it's like their edge. Like some people like the mind game stuff. Because there's some people that do that probably at that level and they're competing and they're doing that stuff to psych people out. Like everybody has different approaches to that kind of ism, right?
Yeah, and some people do it as a mind game.
For
Some
you,
people
you
just
couldn't.
do it because they just feel weird and they're not comfortable being uncomfortable. And I was always just, I'm here for my job. My job is to go and perform and try to win. And it sounds harsh, but I don't care what you think of me. My friends are going to call me on Monday,
Right.
you know?
So as you're growing up and you're the kid who's overly competitive, how is life outside of competing? How is it making friends? Are you going to sleepover parties? Are you missing out on being a child? What is childhood like when you're an Olympian, hopeful?
I had a very normal childhood. I guess really the only thing that I didn't do that would be normal for the average or most people would be I didn't play any school sports and I wasn't involved in any school activities because I was so busy with racing. But I made it a point to have a fun and enjoyable childhood. I had friends. I had friends that were from racing, and I had friends that played baseball and things like that. I mean, in high school, I was very active. I had a lot of friends. I was on. I mean, I hate to even say. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I was on homecoming court. So that meant that
What
I was.
is that?
It's like I was runner-up for being the homecoming king.
Oh, okay.
So that means
Oh.
that like I
So you're,
I was popular, quote unquote. I don't know how you say that, but I was very active.
Yeah.
I was a part of the community at school.
Yeah.
And had friends and did that stuff, but I didn't do any outside of school activities.
So you graduated I graduated high school 2010. You're 2011. Or 2010 too. So let's look at your Olympic life. So 2012 Summer Olympics in London, you finished 7th overall. This was your first time being in the Olympics, right? How old are you in 2012?
So I was 19. So I was young. So I graduated high school at 17.
Okay.
And
so when you're runner-up to homecoming king, people know, oh, Connor Fields is going to be in the Olympics.
No.
next year. No, nobody knows.
It all
you're
happened.
not being asked out by every girl.
No.
Oh,
it all happened so fast. So the first time BMX racing was in the Olympics was 2008.
Okay.
So I was 15 at the time. And I watched the Olympics and I was like, wow, that was so cool. I really want to do that. And on my calendar in my head, I had circled 2016 because I'm like, there's no way I'll be good enough by the time I'm 19.
Wow.
So the fact that I made it in London, I was the youngest rider in our entire event around the whole world. I was the
19.
only one that was 19 at the entire event. And in order to make the American team back then, the U.S. got a silver and a bronze in Beijing. So we had 2 out of the 3 medals in Beijing came from the Americans.
Silver and bronze.
Silver and bronze. There were only 3 members, or only 3 riders make the U.S. Olympic BMX team. So at that point in time, I was looking to have to push out a silver medalist, a bronze medalist, or the 2007 world champion.
Wow.
So it was the hardest team to make by far. And so I didn't really think it was realistic, but I was going to go for it anyway. And then things just started happening pretty quick. So 2009, I raced my first World Cup, and I set a record that still stands today for the youngest rider to ever podium a World Cup.
Right.
And then it was like, okay, I might actually be able to push one of these guys out. So then I kept working, ended up making the team in 2012, but nobody would have saw it coming until about a year before. It all happened very fast. And that was just, I was just tenacious with how hard I worked. I had absolutely no respect for my elders. I wanted to take their job, and I was able to work my way up and be successful in doing that. And all those girls who didn't ask me out in high school called me after the 2012 Olympics.
You remembered every single
Oh,
one.
yeah. But in London, I actually was the number 1 seed in the final. I had a very good chance to win. I entered as the favorite, both Vegas betting odds, and
Really?
the last thing the commentator on NBC said was, I'm going to go with Connor. I think he's going to win. And I should have probably won that race, but being 19 caught up to me in that moment, and I didn't execute.
And let's go into that moment. So why did you finish 7th?
I just didn't perform that well in the final. I just
Because
clammed up, choked, whatever you want to call
you
it.
choked.
Yeah. So
And it's just experience, being in the moment.
when I was young, now I've been through the range, so I can laugh at this. But when I was young, I used to say, experience is something that older athletes talk about to make themselves feel better about being old,
Wow.
which is something
Cocky.
a cocky, arrogant asshole, excuse my French,
Yeah.
17-year-old, 18-year-old would say. And then you get older and you realize there's something to be said for experience, and that young punk kid needs a talking to,
Right.
right? And, having that mentality is definitely what helped me be successful at such a young age, because I don't think you could do things like be the youngest to do X, Y, and Z without having a little bit of that in you.
Definitely.
And not having my heroes would walk by me, and instead of looking at them and wanting their autograph, I would think I'm going to beat you.
Wow.
You had to have a little bit of that in you.
Right.
But as you get older, you realize the value of experience.
Right. And when you flash forward to 2016 in Rio, when you end up winning the gold medal, the experience from 2012 has to be tremendously helpful for you, right?
After the Rio Olympics, I was actually part of a study that the U.S. Olympic team did. They were trying to figure out what they could do to not make athletes go through that experience that I went through, which is having a bad first Olympics and correcting your mistakes at the second, because it happens all the time.
Right.
Because there is nothing comparable to the Olympics in any sport. Doesn't matter what sport you're in. The Olympics is on another level. And no matter how much people tell you what to expect,
Yeah.
or tell you what it's going to be like, there's no way to know what that moment is truly going to be like until you've lived through that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So they were trying to figure out, what are some ways that we can better prepare our athletes to not have that experience? Because the single biggest thing that helped me in Rio was failing in London and knowing what that moment felt like both before, during, and after. And there's really no price tag you can put on that experience.
And what did the study end up saying? I mean, what was the...
I didn't see the results. I just was interviewed as to my experiences.
Interesting. Yeah. And the study was conducted by the U.S. Olympic Committee.
Yeah, because it's so common that happens.
Yeah, it's like Malcolm Gladwell could write a whole book just kind of like, I love how he
Outliers.
does,
I like that.
I love Outliers. I love all this stuff. Tipping Point. But he could write a whole book just on failure to the second season, and that's why we see consistently in professional sports and NFL, NBA, the way teams knock on the door before they end up becoming eventual champions. Like when I was watching the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl last year, to me, I had a lot of feelings of that. Like, oh, they're knocking on the door. They were so close, but there's some experience you need to have in those moments to lose that game to end up getting to the next game. The coolest thing that I love about you winning the gold specifically in Rio, tell me if this is true or not. You won a geography B in 5th grade, and the answer to win this geography B with the final question, that answer to the final question was Rio de Janeiro.
That is correct.
How full circle is that? Is that wacky? That's wacky. I mean,
it is
right?
wild for sure, yeah. I don't really remember much about that geography B. I do remember that the question was something about a river
Yeah.
And the city is named after a river in Brazil, and I just said the only city that I had heard of in Brazil.
You know, were you like, I mean, being that ultra competitive, for fifth grade, not spelling bee, geography bee, were you like, punching people out? I mean, you were competitive. You wanted to win this thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be in a geography bee, no one wants to do it to get fifth. But yeah, so I mean, that's pretty cool. It's definitely one of
Full
those
circle.
like full circle things, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of really cool full circle moments.
And tell us what it feels like. I mean, we might not have another guest ever in the Vegas Huddle who's an Olympic gold medal champion. I mean, what does that feel like when somebody puts a gold medal around your neck at the Olympics? What does that feel like?
There's a few different moments that are all amazing, but they're also different. So there's that initial moment when you cross the finish line, right?
Yeah.
And
And you won.
it sinks in that you won, and that's pure shock. And all the photos, like my face is just complete and total shock.
Yeah.
And then there's just that initial like burst of celebration with your coaches and with your teammates or whoever's right there, and you go crazy. And then there's a moment of like kind of realization, and you're like, wait, hang on a second, like I did this. And then from the finish line you go, and then you immediately get changed into the podium outfit. And so during that's when everybody's coming up to you and congratulating you, and you're just sitting there like pinch yourself. You look at your phone, and your phone is just like on fire. It's just like ding, 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 like nonstop. And then you walk over to the podium, and they introduce the bronze medalist, the silver medalist, and then they always say, and the Olympic champion. And then you step up onto the podium, and they raise the flags, and they play the anthem and the whole thing, and it's indescribable what that moment felt like.
Yeah.
But all I could remember was like everything that it took to get to that moment, and just try to appreciate that moment. Like all the hard work physically, all the tough losses and the hard days, all the broken bones or the injuries, the fights with your coach or your teammates or whoever, your parents driving you up and down the West Coast to go to all these events when you were a kid. And like for me, like I just kept getting those flashbacks while I was in that moment, and I was like trying to enjoy the moment as best as I could, but it all happened so fast, right? And then it's over. And then I remember I didn't go to bed that night until like 6 a.m. Not because I was doing anything. I stayed dead sober because I wanted to enjoy the moment, like truly enjoy the moment. And I knew I was going home to Vegas. I was like, I'll party when I get home. But
And how old were you?
23.
Right.
So
and when you have a moment like that at 23, I mean, there's a good chance the rest of your life, there's not a singular moment that's going to live up to that for the rest of your life. I mean, unpacking that.
yeah,
At the age of
I mean, I
23
wasn't
is
thinking
weird.
that at 23.
But now, right? Like, isn't that it's a weird thing to have such a highlight, right? I mean,
it is. In many ways, it is. It was, for me at least, it was almost a little bit of like I don't want to say relief, but I worked so hard for it, and I always believed that I would do it. And that's not in like an arrogant way, but you don't get out of bed in the morning every day for 10 years straight
yeah.
if you don't believe you can do something. You know, I'm not sacrificing everything just to try to maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe I'll get lucky.
Yeah.
Like I believed I would do it. So in a sense, it was almost a relief. Like, okay, mission accomplished.
So let me ask you, following up with that thought, you're an honest guy, so really be truthful with me here. And this is why I love guys like Kobe, Tom Brady, all this kind of stuff. After you have that check off your list, when you get that gold medal in 2016, when you're gearing up for 2020, in your heart, did you have the same passion, feeling like I need to make this happen again, or were you good?
No, I totally did. And for me, I had that feeling for some of the smaller events.
Right.
Where I was like, this was my 100th X event I've done.
Right.
I've won it 60 times. Like that one was just, I was clocking into work.
Right.
But for me, like having had the experience and knowing what it feels like to win a medal,
You wanted it again.
there's no drug in the world that comes close to that. Like that feeling. And not just the feeling of winning in the accolades, but knowing like I worked my butt off for 4 years for something. And then in the biggest pressure moment that you could imagine, you delivered and you did it.
Right.
Like that was what I wanted to do. And so I pushed myself to be as physically strong as I could be, as in best shape as I could possibly be in. And also if you want to try to go to that level, like I won a gold medal and that makes you a legend. I want to win 2 and go even to the next level, whatever that would be. Like, and that's Tom Brady's won 6, 7 Super Bowl rings, 7 Super Bowl rings. He wants number 8, just as bad as he wanted number 2, 3, 4, 5, and
Right.
6. And so going into Tokyo, I still had all that same fire and hunger. We can get into it later, but like the thought of going to another one, I didn't have it to that same level anymore because you can only run that candle for so long before that candle burns out.
Right. Tokyo, of course, you know, is something we have to dive into. I mean, first of all, you know, everybody's familiar with the crash, you know. This was not just a crash that ended your dreams of, you know, getting another medal. I mean, you were fighting for your life from this crash. And ladies and gentlemen, if you go on YouTube and you watch this crash from Connor Fields, I mean, it's really disturbing and it's tough to watch. But from this crash, you had broken ribs, collapsed lung, torn shoulder and bicep ligaments, 4 brain hemorrhages, brain swelling. The official diagnosis, I'm going to mispronounce some of this, was a subdural hematoma, a supraconoid hemorrhage. Explain all this kind of stuff. I mean, this is insane. What happened?
So, I have no memory of the entire day. So, I can't tell you what I was thinking before, during, after. Our semifinals were run over a best of 3 format. And in the third and final semifinal, French rider and I collided at one of the fastest points on the track. And it all happened so fast that I didn't have a chance to put my hands out to brace my fall, nothing. I basically went headfirst into asphalt at 40 miles an hour. And when that happened, it caused a traumatic brain injury. Alongside the other things that you'd mentioned. And instantly, my brain began swelling because it had just bashed up against my skull. There was 4 spots in my brain that were bleeding, and I was not breathing. So the first immediate reaction by the medical team there was to create an airway to make sure that I was breathing. From there, they were trying to stabilize me, get me on a bodyboard. It was very clear that I was not well, so they weren't going to like try to like get me to wake up and walk it off. So I was loaded onto a bodyboard, put into an ambulance. I was totally unconscious for around 20 minutes before I came to, at which point I would only respond if somebody was like screaming at me. The neurologist luckily was actually at my event. Went to the hospital in Tokyo. They did all the scans, see what was going on. They were debating whether or not they were going to have to cut part of my skull to relieve the pressure of the swelling, but luckily the swelling didn't get any worse and they didn't have to cut into my skull. And from there, basically, it was 3-4 days until I fully came to, at which point they were like, well, we have no idea what kind of condition he's going to be in when he wakes up. And so I woke up in a hospital room in Tokyo with no idea how I got there, no idea what was happening, and nobody who spoke English to tell me what was going on.
Plus, this is during COVID.
During COVID.
You know, so your family, friends, nobody could attend the Olympics that year.
No one was there.
Dr. Jonathan Finoff, the chief medical officer for the U.S. in Tokyo, said this injury was the worst injury during the entire Tokyo Summer Games. It
was the worst injury in the entire Tokyo Summer Games. It was one of the worst accidents in the history of the Summer Olympics. It was nearly died on impact.
Right. Yeah. And it's such a blessing. It's a blessing from God that you're here and doing so well, considering you had to relearn vocabulary. You had to learn how to speak again, short-term memory loss. The New York Times article, just the image of your torn jersey, you know, it's scary, you know, it's ridiculous. First of all, congrats on just being great and doing so well. When you think back on this, I mean, how are you here today?
Yeah, I mean, who knows, like, had I hit just a little bit differently, it could have been so much worse. Had I hit a little bit differently, it could have been so much better. Maybe, a lot of times people say, oh, wow, you had a really bad concussion. It's like, I wish I had a concussion. I wish that's all I had, right? It was not just a concussion. It was a brain injury. And I'm very thankful that all of the injury and everything that happened, none of it was permanent, and that I was able to make a full recovery. But what ended up happening was when I got home, we immediately went straight to the University of Utah, and I began a process to diagnose exactly what part of my brain wasn't functioning properly, what we needed to do to get it functioning properly. None of it was physical. All the brain-body connection was still there. It was all processing speed. It was memory. It was some vocabulary stuff, things like that. But it was all things that I could relearn. And so then we mapped out a rehabilitation process. Same way if you tear an ACL, you have a process of you do these exercises for 4 weeks, these for 4 weeks, and same sort of thing for the brain. But the scary thing about a brain injury is no one will tell you that you're going to make a full recovery. They just tell you, hey, just listen to the doctors, do the best you can, and time will tell. And so that's terrifying to know, like, am I always going to feel like this? Am I always going to be just all of a sudden my brain goes blank and I can't work a problem out anymore? I mean, one of the first things that I was doing, and it was ridiculously hard, is they would give me a 3-word sentence. So, I am here would be an example. And then I would have to repeat that backwards. So it would be, here am I. I couldn't do it. And it would take me 5 minutes to work out how to reorganize the words or whatever. And what ended up happening over time was as I healed, and time was the best friend here with any injury. Your body is amazing. Bodies can do a lot to heal themselves. As my brain began healing and as I began to feel better, my instincts and my personality came back and kicked in. So then I ended up attacking my rehab the same way that I attacked trying to win the Olympic gold medal. I did everything. I left no stone unturned. I went to a hyperbaric chamber every single day. I completely eliminated sugar from my diet for months because sugar's bad for your brain when you have a brain injury. Didn't touch alcohol for 6 months. I prioritized sleep, and I would sleep 12 to 14 hours a night. I mean, I did everything in my power. If I was told to do this rehabilitation exercise 3 times, I'd do it 10. Like, I did everything I possibly could because if there's ever been something to dedicate to, it's your health.
Right.
I don't want to feel like this forever. I'm going to give my body everything I possibly can to give it the best chance to recover. And so over time and with an amazing group of people around me, I was able to get to a point where I felt pretty good. And so at the 6-month mark, I went back to Utah and we did the same tests that I took initially. And I had like significant improvement across the board in every category. And they were able to say, like, we think you've made a full recovery. The tricky part and the tricky thing is no one ever takes stock of how they feel and what normal is, expecting that tomorrow you're going to get a traumatic brain injury. So I think I'm normal. I think I feel the same, but I don't know.
Meaning you really can't reconnect your mind to your brain wiring prior to the accident. Is that what you're trying to say?
So I can do anything that I could do before, I can do. Everybody that I know who knows me well tells me I'm the exact same person. But
you're not sure.
Maybe my memory is a little bit worse. I don't know. Like, there's no way of knowing exactly how I feel. Maybe I don't feel the same energy that I did before. Maybe I feel better because I worked really hard at recovering my brain. Like today, how you feel right this very moment. I hope you never have to experience this. But if you have a brain injury tomorrow and you have to go through this big rehabilitation process, you have no way of knowing how normal feels today.
Yeah.
So you could get back in this chair a year from now and be able to do this interview the same way, and your friends and family would say, hey, he seems the exact same, he seems the same, but you don't really know, which is a kind of a scary thing.
Yeah, it's trippy to
It
kind of
is.
think about. So your sense of self and who you knew as Connor Fields prior to the accident, do you feel that you are that same person or
I feel the same. I think I'm the same. I think I made it for recovery. But what I think, one thing that I think it taught me, or one thing that I took from it that, not that I didn't know this before, but how fragile life is in general. Like when you, and I think anybody who's had a near-death experience probably says something similar, but when you've nearly died, it puts a whole lot of things into perspective, right? So when I do some public speaking now, and one thing I say in that is how right before that crash, a minute before, 2 minutes before, you could have said, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to you today? And I would have answered, I would have get fourth. And now I wish upon everything that I got fourth place.
right?
And if you've never been through something like that, it's hard to understand that.
So you now being settled and all this kind of stuff, you don't have it grappling with the emotions. There, it's only thankfulness. It's not you have zero anger
No,
about the
totally.
that you got hit and
Totally.
the
I was 30
circumstance.
minutes
Or is
away
it
from
mixed emotions or is it just gratitude?
I was 30 minutes away from having a chance to win another gold medal.
Right.
I trained for 5 years, and I don't even remember the race. I had an amazing 23-year career, and I don't remember my last race. But as soon as I get frustrated, sad, or angry about that, it's really easy for me just to redirect that and say, I'm here, I'm 100% healthy, and I can do whatever I want with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And that kind of overpowers and overshadows the other feelings because they're still there. Like, I'm still me. I still think that, dang it, I should have won that race. I had those guys covered. That's still in there.
Mm.
But it's overpowered by the fact of, hey, you didn't win that race. You had a horrible thing happen to you, but you get to one day be a father. You get to create a life that you want to create, and you're not in a wheelchair, or you're not brain dead. You're not dead. Like, it's pretty easy to.
Have you been back on a bike since?
Yeah. So I had my 7, 8, I think it was 8 months. I had my final appointment with the brain surgeon and a brain neurologist. At this point, I had shoulder reconstruction. I'd done 4 or 5 months of rehab at the UFC Performance Institute for my shoulder, and I was all physically better. And the doc kind of cleared me and said, hey, look, you've made a recovery. There's no way of knowing what's going to happen if you take another hit. You're definitely going to be in a place where more and more hits to the head is never a good thing. But these are just decisions and choices you're going to have to make. I'm not going to tell you have to wrap yourself in cotton and never do anything again.
Right.
And so for me, I worked my whole way back, and I went and rode, and I trained, and I wanted to see if I still wanted to do it. And that's where there's definitely a piece of me that, what an amazing story to come back and then go back, almost die at one Olympics, and then go win the next one. Like, that would have been really cool. But I just didn't have that same fire that I had for the past 12 years racing professionally. And I figured, regardless of that specific hit, that day was going to come at some point when I woke up in the morning and I didn't want to be at that same level. And for me, like, I'm never going to try to go to the Olympics for any other reason than to win. I'm not going to go just to get the T-shirt and say I'm here and post it.
Gear is pretty cool. I'd go for the gear.
I would trade all my gear for a medal. But, for me, it was like, if I'm doing this to win.
Right.
And I knew that one day there would be a day. And then towards the end, I was getting closer. There was definitely more days that were like, I have to go to the gym today, versus like that burning desire, which I think is normal over time when you do anything for long enough. But I just woke up in the morning and I would go and train, and I just felt done. I just didn't want to do it. And so I didn't want to do it at a lower level. I didn't want to do it and have my sponsors, coach, team supporting me 100% if I wasn't going to give them 100%. And I've won everything it's possible to win in my sport. I've done everything I wanted to do, and I felt, it's probably time. And I feel amazing about 99.9% of my career. Would I have loved it to end a little bit differently? Of course.
Right.
But when I think about that, I think about the fact that I'm here having this conversation with you, and I can explain how it felt to win the Olympics in Rio.
And that's why, I mean, I can see why you're such a great public speaker. When you do this stuff now, and you got to go check out connorfields.com and check out his website, more about his story, and see some of, the testimonials about how great of a speaker you are. What do you think the number one reason why somebody is having you as a speaker? I mean, just being an Olympic gold medal champion, but I also think the crash is a great learning lesson and a great tool, and it gives great perspective. It's so funny because circling back to the beginning of our conversation, that cocky kid who didn't think experience meant anything, your experience is such a great asset for perspective to teach people. What do you feel as a teacher you can teach the public most?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's so many things. Like I think I'm the only Olympic athlete in the history of the games. There's no way to check this, but I think I'm the only athlete who has both won the Olympics and nearly died in the Olympics. That is the range.
That's pretty crazy.
That is literally as far opposite on the range as you can get. And in there, I also choked at one as the favorite.
See, right.
So many different experiences, so many different things. And one of the things I think that you can really take from that is like learning, and how important learning is. Whether you're as an athlete, a business owner, somebody in life, relationships, whatever it is, it's a constant. You have to constantly be striving to learn from your experiences, good and bad. Figure out how you can take that, be better the next time, not make the same mistake. Or, okay, I won. Why did I win? How do I make sure I keep winning? Whatever it is. So learning from good, learning from bad. Yeah. But ultimately, when I speak, when I'm doing a keynote presentation, I want people to leave there with a handful of things that they specifically learned that they can go and apply to their life. But I want them to feel inspired, motivated.
Yeah.
I want them to feel emotional, to appreciate every day, because you just never know what could happen. Like like I said a second ago, like thinking that fourth place at the Olympics was the worst possible thing in the world 30 seconds before. Right? Like just having that wake up in the morning and so one of the other things, I guess, to close this out, how I end my speech, one of the things I talk about is how I trained for the Olympics for 5 years. I don't remember them. And how I raced for 23 years and I don't remember my last race. But I remember everything else. And how it would be so easy for me to get stuck focusing on what I don't have versus focusing on what I do have. And in any aspect of life, if anything's going bad, if life's good but one thing's going wrong, what do we think about? You think about the one thing going wrong. If 100 people comment on your Instagram, telling you how great you were, but one person tells you, you look fat, all you're going to focus on is that one person who told you that you didn't look good, instead of the 100 people who told you that you look good.
Yeah.
It takes a conscious effort to think about, hey, let's focus on the positives. Let's be thankful instead of focusing on the one negative thing or the things that aren't going well.
100%.
So I think that's something that my story is just a living example of someone. I wake up every day and I have a choice. I could choose to be bitter. I could choose to never want to see my sport again. I could choose to not want to talk about my experiences.
Yeah.
But I choose to be thankful that look at all these amazing, incredible people I've met, things that I've done, experiences I've had. How can I share those with other people?
2 last questions for you. One, I know you have a fiance. Having kids in the future, would you want this for them? Would you want your kid to have the strain of competing for the Olympics and being put in that position and that pressure and that danger? Would you want your kid to be in that position?
If that's what they want to do. So I am a huge proponent and believer in sport in general. Doesn't matter what sport. And there's so many amazing things that you can learn about life through sports. Dedicating yourself, working hard, how to be a good teammate, how to win, how to lose, how to be humble. So many amazing things that sport teaches you about life that are applicable in business, school, whatever it is. So when I have a son, daughter, I will say you can pick any sport you want. I'm going to expose you to all these different sports.
Yeah.
You just have to do a sport. And up until a certain age, I guess I'll figure it out as I go. But up until a certain age, I'm going to encourage that they have to play a sport.
Okay.
I don't care if it's bowling. I don't care if it's field hockey. I don't care if it's track and field.
Yeah.
But if they want to try to be the best ice hockey player ever and make the NHL, I'm going to give them every opportunity to do that.
Okay. Let's just say this. I want to know your reaction. Let's just say there is a news alert after this interview. You get a push notification saying the U.S. Olympics, the Olympics in general, overseeing committee, welcomes esports into the mix. How would you feel about that?
You know, I feel two different ways so I have a business degree from UNLV.
Yeah.
If I put my business degree on or my business hat on, I get it. That's eyeballs. That's ad revenue. That's money. That's going to help both the Olympics and the U.S. Olympic Committee.
Yeah.
So I get it. And I don't want to like piss people off here, but I don't think playing a video game is comparable to the people playing the games that they're actually playing from a physical standpoint.
So should it be or yes or no?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
But then where do you draw the line? Because, for example, equestrian's an Olympic sport. Does the horse get a medal? You know, like, where do you draw the line? So there's so much gray area here.
Gotcha.
And you can make so many arguments. Like, so archery.
What in the Olympic Village cafeteria, what is the sport everybody makes fun of?
I mean, I don't want to put
Say
I
it.
don't wanna,
Say
I don't
it.
wanna,
Say
I don't
it.
wanna bury anybody.
Just say one. Just say it.
I don't
You've been
wanna
honest the
bury
whole
anybody.
time.
I don't
You're
wanna
not
bury
burying
anybody. I'd have to think about it.
No,
I think,
you know it.
No,
What is it?
I think everybody has respect.
When they're in line, they're like, "Oh, yo, your chicken looks good today." Hey, do you believe this? Sport. Do you believe they have these? I mean, are these guys even allowed to come get lunch in this place? What sport is it? Just tell me.
I don't even.
Please.
I'm racking my brain. I can think of some sports like that we kind of laugh at, but not necessarily because they're not hard. Ping pong. Ping pong is hard as heck. You seen those guys play?
No, that's hard.
I mean, it's insane what they do.
You can't give me one.
I mean, I'm really thinking. I mean, you can help me out here. I mean, equestrian's an interesting one just because it is both the athlete and the animal.
Yeah.
So that one's a bit different, but I don't really think there's one sport where everyone's like, oh, that's an easy one. Because if you're going to go to the Olympics in anything, that means you're the best in the world at something, right? So what I was going to say about archery a second ago is like, that's hard as heck. Archery's what they do is incredible.
Yeah.
But how is that comparable to somebody running a marathon from a physical standpoint?
It's different.
It's hard. It's not easy. I mean, the drawstrings on those bows are heavy as heck. You have to stand out there and concentrate for hours. But that's not really comparable to running 26.2 miles. So it's like, how does the Olympics draw the line of what is and is not acceptable as a sport?
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's one of those weird questions where it's like, even in baseball, like to me, the hardest thing you put.
You just answered my question for me. You answered my question.
You ask any person in the world, go into an MLB stadium and hit a home run. That's going to be super difficult for the most people to do, I would say, from a percentage standpoint. But if you look at the people in the MLB and how a pitcher can do it, and then you look at, NFL and NBA, it's like weird. It challenges your mind and the way we comprehend things because you just pick one person out of a bus stop and say, go hit a home run in an MLB stadium, or you say, hey, go make a layup. It's two different things, But I would think hitting that home run would be maybe the hardest thing to do.
Have you golfed?
Yes.
Golf's pretty hard too.
Golf's hard too.
They're all hard.
You see,
You answer my question though. Baseball is the sport that we laugh at, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you
Really?
why. 100%, and I'll tell you why. If you see track and field athletes at the Olympics, you know they're the best in the world. If you see weightlifters at the Olympics, you know they're the best in the world. If you see BMXers, they're the best in the world. When you see the baseball players, are they the best in the world?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're not going to... Mike Trout doesn't play in the Olympics.
So we get frustrated because people that get to go to the Olympics for baseball, they're not even in the top 100. Because if you're good enough, you're in the major leagues.
Yeah, but even the NBA stuff, things shifted when Krzyzewski was running the organization. When the Colangelos kind of took over the USA basketball initiative. Like there was different things. It used to be more of an amateur thing, and then all of a sudden, when I'm growing up and you're growing up, LeBron, Kobe,
Yep.
KD,
They changed the rules on that to allow professionals and allow people to earn money
Right.
while they're going, and so everybody does except the baseball. So the NBA players, the best of the best. Maybe not LeBron, maybe not
Right.
the one, 2, 3 best players in
But
the
it's
world.
still
But that's the thing with baseball. So that's what the athletes in other sports. It almost, in my opinion, like I love baseball. I love going to a ball game, and if the best in the world are there representing their country, let the game on for the Olympics. If not, well, then how are we then drawing the line? Are we just going to say, like, oh, other sports, you guys can come in and we're not going to send your best and brightest. We're just going to send the people who aren't quite good enough to make the real high level stuff, but we'll send you guys.
very interesting. This is food for thought. My last
I'm going to
question.
get some big hate on that. I'm a huge baseball
no,
guy. I
no,
would
you're
love
not
to
gonna-
see the all Japan team, the best of the best from Japan, play the best of the best from the Dominican Republic, play the best of the best from Mexico. Like that would be
Right.
amazing. Some amazing games.
I
But
don't-
that's not what we get.
It's good. I'm happy you answered honestly. Last question for you. Where is this gold medal in your home? Like, where do we have this?
It's just I have like a kind of a display area that I have most of my trophies and accolades and stuff that I've got over the years, and it just sits there. It's nowhere fancy, and it sits right next to the first trophy I ever won in 1999.
There you go. The gold medal to the first trophy you ever won. I lied. Where is Bulgaria geography wise on a map? Since you did win that geography B in 5th grade, what's next? What country's next to
Be in
Bulgaria?
Europe. I mean, off the top of my head, I would think it's close to Hungary.
You're actually gonna try to answer. I was just messing with you.
I think it's by Hungary. I think it's kind of over near like the Czech Republic. It's over in like not middle of Europe, but not quite Eastern Europe, but not Western Europe. More.
You got to. I don't even know where Southern Highlands is, to be honest. You have to show me where that is. Listen, Connor Fields, what a pleasure to have an Olympic gold medal champion inside the Vegas Huddle with us. So much great insight on being someone who excelled to the nth degree of what you could accomplish in your field. So thank you so much for providing some insight on what it takes to be a success. This is what the conversations in the Vegas Huddle are all about. Great local guys and people that are just striving for excellence and teaching us what it's like to be excellent. We'll have more on this full conversation. You can watch it on YouTube. You can listen to the whole thing wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, tune in for more conversations on the Silver State Sports and Entertainment Network. I'm your host, Mike Davis. Connor, thanks so much for being with us again.
Thank you.
Guys, we'll see you next time inside the Vegas Huddle.